Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming to this meeting of our Warrant Committee as we get into rather detailed discussions of several budget items and some of the warrant articles that are coming before us. I imagine that at this point we have our quorum and that everybody has received all the electronic transmittal of the minutes for the meetings. And if there are no changes to those meeting minutes, the chair will entertain a motion to accept them as presented.
January 27th.
January 27th meeting.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you very much. Our first, we're gonna be a little bit fluid with our agenda, but the first item on the agenda will have consolidated facilities. Bill Ritchie can come and present to us for the consolidated facilities budget. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, yep. So I'm sure you got my narratives on the
Yes.
on the budget.
Yes, thank you.
I'm really not asking, I don't think I'm really asking for much here this year. I mean, I made some changes, but other than stormwater, that increased 6% actually the information came from Chase Berkeley. You know, they designed the budget and it goes to my budget and I pay off those bills. So he estimated about 6% increase this year, and that's what I put in. I'll just tell you what I think, and if you have any questions, you can ask them. And then a 5% increase on contractual services for our school dude computerized maintenance program. That's how we do all our maintenance, all our logging, and every year it goes up about 5%. So that's the only increase there, and that's essential to have this type of program. We've done about 12,000 work orders in the last 5 years. They're all tracked. We know exactly who does them, what it costs, and where all the work goes, so.
Is that a contractual thing that you do once a year, or do you have a long-term?
It's a contract that we have to,
Like a renewal?
yeah, it's all web-based, they own it. All the information that we put into that is it's all stored somewhere else.
If you did a multi-year contract on that, would you get any better rate?
We actually do get a great rate, because actually it's called School Dude, and it's technically only for schools. I made a deal with them that I could put all the town buildings on it also, so we're probably getting a $10,000 system for $5,000. Yeah, not any better than that. An increase of 3% on the contractual services for, so all the elevators, the generators, the fire alarms, you know, we have about 35 different vendors that we deal with, so, and every year prevailing wage goes up, and I just took a little snapshot of what it would cost. So if you look at the labor rates today, every year they go up about 3% for the Department of Labor, so I put it's not really the contracts, it's the hours that they're charging me, it goes up. That's pretty substantial. And we're kind of holding our own, so sometimes we go over, but, you know, we try not to do, we try not to exceed 3%. And then an increase of 3% needed for subcontracting cleaning. You know, it's bare bones, the budget for, a $70,000 cleaning budget, when you're doing 4 buildings, it's bare bones. But we try to do enough to maintain what we have to maintain, and this year we're actually helping out with the teen center. So I'm using my cleaners to go over there to help out too until they can get established. So
Cleaners are town employees or they're contracted?
the contract.
They're contracted. And for this is a very good contract price.
It's great.
It is
Kind of
phenomenal price.
unbelievable that,
What buildings?
We do town hall,
yeah.
teen center, the library, and COA.
This level is incredible.
Yeah.
I mean, I had an uncle who was in this business,
Yeah.
and this is
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, I've gone out a couple of times, and then
Yeah.
you find the bigger companies, and we have a lot of different hours here.
And they're bonded and insured and all that. And you're
They
right,
do,
but-
yeah.
Okay,
But
gotcha.
it's a very small company, and they live fairly local, they can help us out, but the bigger companies, the contracts go about $75,000 because
Yeah.
they only want you to use their hours.
Oh, yeah.
We do different hours, we have to accommodate everybody in meetings here, so
Oh, yeah.
they come and go.
No, we
It's
see
like,
them
yeah.
coming in all the time.
Yeah, so it's, I'll keep our fingers
Yeah,
crossed with that.
this is this is very good. It's really kind of remarkable.
And that, and so that's my quick little narrative, and then obviously salaries has been, it's pretty standard. We've gone down, for next year, we actually gone down. Because we took the full-time electrician and we made that position part-time. So we saved about $28,000 right there. And,
Has that been effective? You haven't suffered in service?
No, and the only reason why I did it because, well, the first thing was we earlier, obviously in the season, we thought there'd be some budget cuts. So where am I gonna cut? So that was the position.
Yeah.
Why I was able to do that is because over the last 7 years, we did about $1.5 million in energy upgrades. So the need for a full-time electrician is
Right.
not there.
I see.
So, but that's good news, so. That's other than that, pretty much, it's a bare bone budget. I'd hate to be cut. I'd make it work if I had to be cut, but
The good news is that we do not have to look at the 3% down this year. I think you probably already have that information, and level
Yeah,
funding is
yeah,
effectively what we are trying to make happen, and I think probably will.
Yeah.
But if there are any questions, Doug?
Thanks for being here and doing everything, but probably just to inform not just the community, but everybody watching or something. Could you be able to tell us, like, the scope of your department, how many buildings you're actually taking care of, the square footage,
yeah, I have a,
projects you have to, just to remind everybody the extent
Yeah.
of what you're doing, because it's a lot.
yeah, so a little brief history. I've started my 20th year in the town, so I started out in the school department. I don't know, time flies to me.
When you're having fun, right?
Well, I'm having fun, but time flies, I mean. But basically, so obviously, the big thing that drew me to Milton from coming from the private industry was doing the school building project.
Yep.
That was huge. I mean, I did a lot of construction over the years, and that was huge. It was the biggest project in the time. So I did that, and worked out well. And then the town wanted to consolidate, try to move, in one direction, and apply for the job. So it's been probably 8 years now that we're under consolidated facilities. Started out with myself, now there's like a department of 12. It's still bare bone.
Yeah.
So we have about close to 1 million square feet of property, 23 buildings. But we do a gamut of everything, so we do a lot, and, there's like 15 core things that we do, a lot of engineering, design, build, capital planning. I'm on the capital committee, did day-to-day. So it's set up, the way it's set up, on a 75% is that we supply the labor to all the other buildings and at no charge to them. They in turn help us with what it costs for all the materials and subcontractor service above and beyond what I can afford in my budget. I spread every dollar the best I can and try to prioritize. I try to look at the big ticket items, so if I have to put $20,000 from my budget into a boiler, it's a big chunk of money if they don't have the money, but I do it because I want to save $200,000 down the line. That's how I try to run my operations. I mean, I have and obviously I have a big commitment to the schools because I built the schools. And that's where I was, so, but that's your biggest chunk of 670,000 square feet of properties is basically on the schools, another 300 is on the town side. So most of our work's at the schools. There's 4,000 students, 600 staff. So it's 5,000 people use the schools all day long, so they get beat up pretty quick.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's the easy way just to say it, so.
Can I ask
Some
a
of us
question?
toured them earlier. We were kind of impressed at how the condition was. They were in excellent shape.
The schools are in
Very
great
well
shape.
kept, yeah.
So it says here that the Kidder building is part of your responsibility.
It is, yes. Yeah.
So when we were here last year, they came in and talked to us about how they have their own maintenance people that volunteer to come in and do all kinds of work. Can you just walk me through?
So what is my role? So
Yeah.
obviously, originally, it was, I work with the library.
Yeah.
They had the money, they had the funds. I worked with Will on fixing all the different things. So everything on the physical plan on the outside is pretty much, would be me.
Yours, okay.
So when they say, so they do their landscaping.
Right.
They do their snow removal. If there's a low boiler issue, they take anything major, roof leaks, trees,
Got you.
it's me, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you for explaining that, because it
Right, yeah.
just seems
Right.
confusing to the average eye.
Right.
Thank you.
But it's a little bit more challenging now, because now the town has the funding. The money still goes to the library, but it's really in my budget that kind of helps them out, so.
Right.
Before, I would never put that under capital. I would use that funding in the revolving fund.
Oh, yeah.
Going forward, if we keep this building, if it doesn't lease, then it's gonna have to be capitalized, because I don't have the money to support any capital projects anymore.
And your assessment would be that it needed to be redone. It would need to be a capital project that we,
Anything over 25,000, yeah.
thank you.
Which is, today is nothing, it's everything's
I know.
25,000.
I know. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
The solar energy credit for revolving fund, can you talk a little bit about that? It didn't seem like you used a lot of that in
Right.
fiscal 19.
Yeah, so basically, what happened, so that's the actual solar panel, that's the solar panel on this roof.
Yeah.
So for the next 10 years, we'll get, for the next 20 years, we'll get savings because we have solar panels, but for the first 10 years, we get solar credits.
Okay.
Around $7,000 to $9,000 a year, so it goes into that account. I'm trying to build it up, so until we have a major capitalized project, that we can use that money for like a new boiler or something else.
Okay.
Right now, we're using some of those credits to fund the town vehicles that use the
electric.
charging station.
Yeah.
Okay? Because we really have no budget for that, but,
Right.
so we do have two, right now, so we have one charging station here that most of the town vehicles use, and I just put in a second charging station down there, at the yacht club down, right next in that parking lot, But it's a very minimal charge. The money I'm coming in is going, so it's kind of a wash, or it's probably, yeah.
Okay.
And one last thing.
Please.
The stormwater, the
Yeah.
increase of 6%,
Yeah,
is that in a bill that we just received?
that's going forward, that's the increase that, speaking with Chase, and
Yep.
this is what they anticipate going forward.
From the state.
Yeah.
Right, so we're gonna get it somewhere else, we're not getting it from the town, correct? Or is that, like, from the taxpayers? I'm sorry, I didn't say that properly.
What happens is that he tells me what I should be putting in, the bills come to my department, I pay him. How they do their calculation, you'd have to write.
So it's on Chase?
Yes, it is.
I got you now.
Yep,
Thank
yep.
you so much.
I just don't want to speak, and I don't, yeah.
Yep, I got you.
Are there any other questions? Thank you very much. Keep up the
That's
good
it.
work. We're a bunch of teddy bears this year.
That's good, no, and thank you for your service, yeah, I
No,
appreciate it.
thank you. We
All right,
appreciate
yeah.
the work that you do, and you do a remarkable job. You and your crew do a remarkable job keeping the
Yeah,
buildings
yeah,
in
well,
they look
incredible
great.
condition.
Yeah, we do, so we
Yeah.
do maintenance, but school custodians, when you walk to the schools,
Yeah,
they do an unbelievable job.
They are in
Schools look
fantastic
fabulous.
condition,
Yeah.
and it's really, really nice to see.
Well, thanks for
I
your
hope that the kids appreciate it too, but
Yeah.
we certainly do. Those of us
At
who
least-
have to keep
At least at the
house.
high school level.
Yeah.
And at the elementary. The middle school kids are a little bit different.
Well, who of us wants to remember what it was like to be 13, right?
Thank you so much.
Thank you, appreciate it, have a good night.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate you coming.
Yeah, bye.
Next on the agenda, we're very happy to have Cheryl Tugayas, who chairs the zoning board, and she is going to make sense of, I shouldn't say make sense because they do make sense, but they are extremely complex articles, and we're delighted to have her to come and walk us through them.
Good evening, thanks for having
Thank you
me.
for coming.
So, the more complex article, maybe we should do first, it's up to you, but we have
no.
the, you want to do the,
I'll
you
leave
know
it to
what?
you to determine how you want to proceed,
All right, I
because
think
you
we'll-
have a few.
all right, so what we'll do actually, instead of that, because what we have is, the Milton Village overlay has companion articles to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So let's do the one that's not related to Milton Village,
Right.
okay? So that's related to the Great Estates bylaw.
Right.
And
We don't have numbers for these, by the way, yet, but we
Okay.
will.
okay, so it's, you'll see, provision of affordable housing, the type of off-site units. The Pulte development, which is on the old town farm site, had a provision for affordable housing. The goal and the requirement is to have affordable housing that is accepted by the state, so that's DHCD, for the subsidized housing inventory. So in that particular project, we learned that DHCD does not like homeownership in two families units.
So they have to be freestanding?
So they prefer to have, because they find that the management of a two-unit condo, basically,
Oh,
it becomes challenging. And so through some effort of parties in that particular application came to agreement with DHCD, is to have ownership and then a rental, so that the owner rents out one unit. And so that,
Would both be affordable?
yes, so the developer of Wolcott Woods, whose application came in under this particular bylaw, and the planning board issued a special permit under this Great Estates bylaw, followed that discussion and recognized that they needed to speak to DHCD sooner rather than later. And so they had those conversations, and they had those in conjunction with the Affordable Housing Trust. And the DHCD is also of that same position for this particular development, and so our intent here is to revise the zoning to allow that provision to have affordable ownership with rental, rather than having only ownership, which is what the zoning says now. So again, the important part here is that the affordable units have to be accepted by the Department of Housing and Community Development onto the subsidized housing inventory. And in order for that to happen, we need to have this kind of change in the zoning. So, any questions about that?
Specifically, what will that mean for potential ownership? Does it change any of the parameters for ownership? Okay, so the effective,
It's still the 80% AMI.
Right, okay.
It still has to go through the approval agency in terms of how it the owner or the potential buyer and
Right.
renter gets selected. All of those provisions remain the same.
And there were no provisions changing the square footage or any of the,
There is a provision changing the square footage as well.
okay.
And that is something because two families, oftentimes the units are not exactly the same size.
Right.
Because you have a staircase and other things. And both DHCD and the Affordable Housing Trust is supportive of the change here that ties the square footage to DHCD standards rather than a 1,250 square foot that's in the zoning.
And what are those standards?
Okay. So.
Those standards are, I believe it's 850 square feet for a two-bedroom.
The 900,
Oh, a
850 to
two-bedroom.
900 for a
Two-bedroom,
two-bedroom. So it's a very compact two-bedroom, I'm guessing.
Right.
Right. And is there any change in the parking allocation?
No.
And so there would be no issue of space or setbacks or anything of that nature?
No.
Okay.
There's a lot of discussion, my understanding, is with DHCD. Their preference is not to have off-site affordable units. Planning board is mindful of that going forward. But this zoning was, a lot of effort went into this zoning with the community, and in particular, in Canton Avenue, large parcel.
Yeah.
And there's just a lot of that effort, and so we're not looking to, we have a development underway there now.
How many units are contemplated?
Total affordables on that is 6, they're off-site. And on-site is 54.
54 total. Okay. Affordable. Okay.
Construction has started there. So, and
And these
that,
and I'm sorry, one more question, Cheryl. These changes will not affect the development as it is ongoing now. The number of units isn't changing.
Correct.
Square footage isn't changing of the total unit size. Just the individual units are being altered to comply with this.
it's allowing, the special permit allowed for off-site units.
Right.
It didn't stipulate where, the units would be, whether they be in one family, two family, or or other than the unit size that was there. It didn't go, there were some descriptions about needing to be habitable by code and other things like that, but none of that changes.
Right.
The things that change are allowing there to be one rental associated with one ownership and allowing that size to be reduced and tied to DHCD standards. So those are the two changes.
Okay, perfect. Any questions?
Yeah, forgive my ignorance. So all of the affordable housing units of this development now underway are off-site? And they
Where?
don't know where they're going to be? Do they have an idea?
They do have an idea,
Okay,
but they haven't come to us with the exact locations.
okay. Is there some sort of stipulation as to when they're gonna have to build these?
Yes, that's it, tied into the special permit.
Okay.
And they have to be brought online in proportion to market rates being brought online. So there's other provisions about how this works that in the
So as
special
the
permit
development
that's outside
proceeds,
of the
they have to
zoning.
build the affordable housing kind of
Correct.
in relation to
Right.
as, yeah, okay.
Yes.
It's not build all this and then get around to it later.
Correct.
So, okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
No.
And it's built, the affordable housing that's off-site is within the town limits,
Oh,
correct?
yes. Mm-hmm.
John?
It can be 3-family or 2 families. They can redo, right?
I don't know about 3 families. I'd have to go back and look at our special permit, but it's definitely single families and 2 families.
But
I
I
don't
thought the whole purpose of, was having the low income on their property.
Well,
They don't want it.
I know, but I thought that was the whole,
Purpose
the one on Brush Hill Road has
town got
units,
in their property.
right?
well,
Low income?
there's a whole, we can have a whole long discussion about that, but what I'll tell you is, town meeting passed zoning that allowed for off-site affordable units. The applicant made an application to the planning board that was in conformance with the zoning, and the planning board issued a special permit. So because we found with all the conditions that we put into the special permit, that it was in conformance with the zoning. That's what our job is. If it's not in conformance with the zoning, then we can deny it or we can ask them to reapply. But if it meets the zoning, we need to make sure it's the best that it can be, but then it goes forward.
You're not the larger policy issues, you're just the zoning.
The zoning,
Yes.
there was a lot of history to that zoning, which I think would be a subject of another time, respectfully, because there's a lot of, when people are purchasing a large piece of property, there's discussion with neighbors about what might happen with that property, and there was a lot of negotiation in the context of that, with that parcel, with that very large parcel, to try and make sure it could be something where it was negotiated to be a development that people felt would be beneficial to the town.
I appreciate what your board does, but I watched that thing on Church Street, how you had it almost all solved and then it got derailed. So
This is,
your board spends a lot of time, and I feel sorry for you, seriously. It's almost like, I know you don't enjoy doing it,
Things happen,
But-
right.
no, I'm just saying, you spend a lot of time, like backtracking, and it just must be very aggravating for you. But I appreciate what you're doing, I know it's
Thank
not
you.
your issue, but
well, this issue, we didn't know, and we have people
many
involved.
lawyers in the,
We
Well-
have people involved who anticipate what DHCD would
Exactly.
say, but
And it's
we
hard
don't
to-
have a
yeah,
guarantee
you
of
don't
what
have
they're going
guarantees.
to
That's
say.
exactly
So
the
that's
issue.
kind of
but
what
they
came
just
back.
seem
Exactly the
like they
issue.
have things solved, and then it just goes back.
Well, I mean, there are always going to be, extenuating circumstances and peculiarities based on the site, based on the neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. So, one question that I had for you, Cheryl, is this language approved by your board at this point? So that
Yes.
when it comes time for us to vote on it, we'll be able to say this is
Yes.
the final, okay, that's what I
And
always
town
want
council
to
has
be sure.
reviewed it as well.
Perfect, thank you.
We are having a public hearing, however, on Thursday.
Right.
If there's anything that the board hears from the public.
That alters that, please let us know
we will definitely-
ASAP
we will.
with the alterations to the approval. We have a little time, fortunately, but I do want to be sure, because once, every now and then we do run against issues like that. Doug?
Sorry if you've already said this, but just to make explicitly clear, the Affordable Housing Trust and DHCD has sort of agreed with this also,
Yes.
so we're not gonna get any surprises last second.
Right.
I called to confirm that again today, because I knew it was coming tonight, and I wanted to make sure
You knew
that
somebody was going to
Yeah,
ask
somebody's
that.
gonna ask something.
there have been at least 2 meetings with DHCD and with the Affordable Housing Trust on this. And we haven't revisited this, I think, since December ourselves, because it was something that seemed, based on our experience with the Church Street, which is the Pulte, is that we felt that them being more ahead of it
Yes.
was a good thing. Because
good.
on the other one, it was at tail end, and that became harder.
I bet.
Much
Yeah,
harder,
I bet it
yeah.
was, yeah, absolutely. Okay, are there any other questions for this article? If not, let's proceed to the Milton, is the Milton Village overlay one that you wanted to do
Yes,
next to Cheryl? Please.
So I gave you a, what I call a cheat sheet, or a fact sheet.
yeah.
Because the zoning itself is long. So let's just, again, kind of, sorry?
This is huge.
Yeah,
Yeah, this is the Milton Village Business District. So right now, it falls into the business zoning. We have 4 districts, Central Ave, Milton Village, East Milton Square, and people don't realize it, but Granite Ave,
Yeah.
where that one big building is another business district.
Way down the end, I think.
Way down at the end.
Flatly building.
The flat building.
Yeah, Flatley.
that's Milton.
Not a great big
Yeah.
empty, except that one building.
Thank you, yep.
So, as we know, zoning sets the uses that are allowed. It sets dimensional criteria, which basically tell you where you can build a building and how big it can be and how tall it can be. And then it also, zoning sets requirements for parking and loading and perhaps landscape improvements. What an overlay does is it sits a new kind of zoning on top of the existing zoning. So it gives an alternative to property owners, but it's not a requirement. So it still leaves the commercial zoning in place. But an overlay is a good tool, and it's been used in Milton as well as other towns, because you can target the kind of development that you'd like to see happen in a different way than just allowing certain kinds of uses, right? So in this case, we want to target mixed-use development, which allows for housing combined with commercial. A minimum amount of commercial is at the first floor to keep an active streetscape, but then housing can be above it. And the idea for this came out of the master plan, some 5 years ago now. It's something the master plan implementation committee's had worked on for over 2 years, held over 40 meetings and public forums, and made presentations. In fact, there's a lot of data on the town's website in the master plan section with studies that I've referenced in here, traffic studies, build-out analyses, parking analyses, and a presentation that I gave on behalf of that committee in September, which goes through all of that data. It's a long presentation, so if you're interested in the detail, I'd suggest you could take a look at that.
That's
One
on
of
your website, is it not?
Yes, it's on the
Okay,
town's website.
that's the one that I saw,
right.
yeah, good, thank you.
So, one of the things about the district is it's been a business district or a mixed-use district
Forever.
since the 1700s.
Yeah.
I mean, Baker Chocolate Factory. And we know that Baker Chocolate, after being purchased by General Mills, closed down in that area. And there were vacant buildings there for quite some time. We have some vacant buildings there now. We have some beautiful historic buildings. We've got some 1950s not so attractive buildings, and we've got a few single families.
Yeah.
But I think most people think it could be more vital. It could be a more vibrant neighborhood. Could have more amenities, even, and could be contributing more to the tax base. I mean, you'll see I highlighted here that our build-out analysis shows that if we get new development through this overlay, that it could yield 120 some to 150 some new residential units. And that kind of development with the first floor commercial, we did analysis, could yield us $500,000 annually based on 2019 tax rates of revenue. So that's, an opportunity. If we think now, we have the Citizens Kiosk site, that generates $17,000 a year in tax. And if you think about that site, it's mostly parking with that little kiosk there. And it doesn't contribute much, to the district. So that's one, obviously, that we think would be a target. But some others that are commercial that might have a hard time renting the upper floors, to a commercial use, or find it difficult to reinvest because they can't get enough income back out of them, this could give them another opportunity.
Is the mixed use limited now by the zoning?
You can't have
Can't have
mixed use right
residential,
now.
you cannot have residential and commercial in the same.
You could have an auto body repair shop on a site, but you can't have a store with housing above it right now in the business district zoning.
And this permits that?
This permits that. So you know,
How has this been received by the neighborhood? I know you've had a number of meetings.
the neighborhood, I can't say that everyone is supportive, but it's generally much more supportive there is much more support than there was when we first started. And that's in part because we did the build-out analyses and we did the traffic and parking analyses. So the build-out, we revised the height downward so that the scale would be more compatible.
Yes.
And so actually on High Street in the overlay, it's only allowed to go 35 feet, whereas under the commercial zoning, it's allowed to go 45.
45, I
So we
remember that.
reduced the height for High Street, which has the smaller buildings, and we kept Adams Street to be
Street
able to go to 45.
Which already exists.
Which already
Actually,
exists. It's
a little
even
higher
greater,
than
yeah,
in
it's
the
even
old building,
greater,
yeah.
right. So that was one of the significant concerns. There's still a lot of discussion about the parking requirements that we put in as a minimum parking requirement. And there's been just a lot of analysis, this location in particular. It's not necessarily that we would recommend this for every location in town, but this is a transit-oriented location.
Well, this is one of the questions that I think some of us would have had, and many of us who go through there or live in the neighborhood will observe that the traffic has become particularly intense in the last 5 years, I'd say. I mean, you can see Adams Street backing up past Hutchinson Field at certain hours of the day, which is very, it's new to some of us who live in the neighborhood. In the traffic studies that have been conducted, how is that integrated?
So the traffic engineer recommended something that apparently has been recommended several times over the last decades, which is a traffic light at the intersection of Adams Street with Canton and Randolph.
Yeah.
And there is planning in the works for that now. Also, they recommend some signalization changes at the intersection of Elliott
Right.
and Adams
Right.
because
That makes sense, yep.
Because you'll have all those lights, and then you'll
Yes.
have one on the other side of the bridge. You have 3 lights within a half mile.
And they also said that really we need to work with Boston because there's an intersection as you cross over
Yes.
that
It's a
contributes
bottleneck.
all the way back. And so I know that town administrators reached out to Boston and there's discussions there. There's also, the funds that thankfully you folks definitely supported and town meeting support last year for the larger scale townwide traffic model. And that's in the works.
Yeah.
And so what we can do, the model is you plug in, let's say a particular change and it models out how the traffic might adjust to it. So we could say if there was this change potentially made at that intersection, what that might do, what that might mean for impacts.
What refinements have been suggested by the hearing? I know you've had meetings around. Have any of the participants made suggestions for changes or alterations that you have been able to incorporate or unable to incorporate in what you've proposed?
So one of the things, there was a lot of concern about scale and how you can address that is through design standards. So we did this in the master plan implementation committee before passing it over to the planning board, where I did actually some massing studies that tied to the design standards, which showed if you, and so there's language in the design standards that make for you having to scale your building and adjust it if you're next to a small residence. That was one of the concerns. And then also that it step back so that it not be a blank facade, so that there be variation in the facades. So once we showed what those design standards how those can help modulate what you can break down a bigger building into smaller pieces, and the fact that we changed the height on High Street, I think people were much more comfortable with the scale that we could get. I mean, one of the things that also controls the scale is the maximum area that we can build. So we have what's called a floor area ratio. So that means if you have a lot, let's say it's 10,000 square feet, and you have an FAR of 1, that means the total building square footage that you can build is 10,000 square feet. Doesn't mean it can be 1 story 10,000, but that's the total square footage. So the maximum here is 1.65. And that's the same level of building as the Masonic Building, you know, the building, the brick building on the
Yep.
corner of Adams and Wharf Street.
Yep.
So I think once, again, sort of visualizing the words, we spent a fair amount of time trying to go through that. On the parking side, in terms of what's the right, so that was a lot of discussion too, in terms of what we can incorporate and not. The planning board actually reduced the minimum required parking. And so there was discussion about that, and the reality is, like some people say, is you will, if you build and provide more parking spaces, you will get people who have more cars. If you build because the developers are going to come and build what they think their market requirements are. So if a developer thinks they need 1.5 spaces per unit to sell their unit, that's what they'll propose to us. Some communities are actually entirely removing a minimum parking requirement altogether. And it's
Really?
kind of surprising, but they are. Here, what we're requiring is 1 space per unit. We're anticipating that these are going to be smaller units. And the, on the business side, because it's just a small amount of business now on the first floor, and ideally, it's something which is an amenity, like a coffee shop or a sandwich shop, where somebody's parking, the customer's parking on the street for the hour or two that they're going to be there, and you put enough on site for the workers, so they're not taking up the spaces on the street. So we did 1 per 1,000. We have, you know, Milton Village, there is a municipal lot,
Yes.
and so I think if we found
It's around
On
the corner
Wharf
next
Street.
to the yacht club.
next to the yacht
On
club,
Wharf
right?
Street.
So,
There, trust me.
It's there, it's not there.
yeah. So
And then
it's-
there's an MBTA parking lot on the other, near the T as well.
So for customers, we're not relying purely on the curbside
Right.
spaces. And in the parking analysis that the consultant provided to us, there was capacity in the curbside. The occupancy of those spaces is at 66%. So.
So there's no
it's-
plan to increase that particular lot?
Not right now, but the
But
town
is there-
could think
There's
about it.
flexibility there if you need it. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I mean, and I'll preface my question with, we have had discussions in the past with the yacht club and oversight of that property, which belongs to the town, et cetera. What are the implications for the yacht club and other pre-existing tenants who may be at will at this point as a result of these potential changes? Are there any immediate changes that they have to think about or they should be concerned about?
No, there's no requirement for any building owner to do anything with this zoning. It's just a tool for someone if they do want to do something with their building. So, you know, landlords, building owners, if they're renting their buildings out, they can continue to do that. The tenants who are there can continue to rent without having to take advantage of this. But it does give, it's just an alternative.
Yes.
You know, it gives more options.
Yeah.
And the other thing is the residential has less traffic impact than the commercial.
Sure.
So if we're looking at having uses that provide us some more vitality, right, and might not cause as much traffic, then this mixed use is the right combination. And having the access to not only the trolley, but the bicycle path, and you can walk to a grocery store, pharmacy,
Oh, yeah.
coffee, you know,
And all those restaurants
all
across
those
the way.
restaurants
Those
across the
restaurants
way.
Walking up the street.
There's an interesting, I have heard from a couple of the residents that the access to the trolley has been impeded because the stairway that leads from the T, from the trolley up to Adams Street, which many of us have taken for years and years, is blocked for whatever reason because of the.
4 years.
Yes, well,
just
not
a
quite
year.
that long. It's been at least a year.
No, I've taken it.
Yeah, it's been at least a year, John, that it's been
Yeah.
permanently closed. It's been at least a year. I don't think it's been 2. But so now you have to really walk around the back. Is there any conversation that has been engaged to see how that can be remedied? Because I think that's an impediment to foot traffic, generally speaking, or the appeal of many people to use that trolley stop.
There's certainly a lot of talk about that, and I know that town administrator met with representatives from the MBTA recently.
Yes.
So they're working on it.
Yeah.
And- Yeah.
The T owns that
Yes, it's the T.
stairwell.
It's the T.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not private property, it's
Okay.
not town property, it's the
I
MBTA.
found that out the other day.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, fortunately, extra space storage, people can walk through their property if they're going up that way, or you have to come around Wharf Street. It's not as convenient as it should be, absolutely. But I know that it's not, necessarily in the zoning purview,
Yeah.
but I know other folks in town are working on that, for sure, because having that is important to this zoning, too.
What changes would you anticipate?
George, before we do the
I'm sorry, go
can I
ahead.
give you another example
do.
of what we did
Yes,
do?
okay, please
There
do.
was discussion about, we have bonus incentives, okay? So the baseline in this zoning, on-site, so no off-sites, is 12% affordable. It had been 10%. The Affordable Housing Trust came to us and asked us to change that to 12, which we did. The other thing is in the bonus, so the bonus incentives apply to Adams Street properties only, so not to High Street. And they allow an additional floor, so a fourth floor. And in order to get that, the town, or the district actually gets something back. They get either additional affordability of up to another 5 to 8%. Another, yes, 5 to 8%, so up to 20%. Or contribution into two different funds, the subject of the other two. One is when we did the Milton Landing work on the master plan implementation committee of the studies, there's always questions about how would any improvements get paid for. We want to set up a fund that, this is subject to planning board special permit process, which is a rigorous process, that monies could be contributed into that fund, which would go to improvements at Milton Landing. There is some discussion about whether that should be changed to be the district in general, not just the landing. So, so that's something that could come as a change, just.
Right.
And then the other one is for aiding in preservation, because preservation of some properties can be expensive. So if, if a development is proposing significant preservation, then there could be some opportunity for that bonus, so that we don't lose our historic properties, right? We definitely did try to make sure we right-size the zonings, that there's no incentive to tear down a building, but that there's enough incentive to renovate the building.
Because there are a couple of them in this zoning
Right.
at the
Yes,
moment.
that are just eyesores.
Well, one of them is, unfortunately, that has been a bone of contention in the town for quite a while, sadly.
Is that, you're talking about the Swift Hat?
the hat
That,
shop, yeah.
there's a proposal
I
moving
know there
forward
is.
now, right.
I know there is. And I think that will be very interesting to see how that works through.
Right.
But that has been a discussion
Is that the
point.
red house?
Yes, and that was most recently, I mean, I think it was in the time that I can remember living in that neighborhood. It's been a tailor shop, it's been a physician's office, it's been a lot of different things. And now it's just kind of there, unfortunately, and deteriorating as we speak. So something positive, I think, would be a nice thing to have in there. Cheryl, with respect to the affordability and adding a fourth floor, it's still subject to the height restrictions on Adams Street, is it not?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yeah.
all this, so all of
We
this
changed
would be...
from 35 and 45 to 37 and 48, I believe, again, with some comments about, can you really get those floors in there at that height?
Yeah.
But that down from what we were, which was 45 and 55.
Right.
And so there's approximately 20-foot grade difference between High Street and Adams Street.
Oh, yeah.
Which allows you to have a 4-story, 45-foot building.
Adams Street.
And then still have it be 35 back here and tuck your parking in underneath. So,
Yeah.
it's a good set of dimensional criteria that can address the two different scales, because the scale of High Street is what's there, and what the scale of Adams Street is a lot different.
And because
that
it's
was
so close to a residential...
Yes.
A very nice residential area, too.
Yes.
People are very sensitive as to what is around them and what's going to abut.
Well, and that was definitely one of the main concerns early on.
I'm sure,
Was
yeah.
whether High Street should be included. And High Street's in the business district already, and it has business uses already.
Yes.
We don't
Yeah.
want to jeopardize anything about those businesses or those uses or those scales. And so, again, the idea was to help people reinvest in their property, not necessarily drive them to do something that neighbors would be unhappy with.
Okay.
One other thing on those funds and those three options, there was a lot of discussion and concern about making sure that they were kind of comparable dollar-wise, so that you wouldn't get an additional floor for a contribution for, let's say, improvements to the landing that was a lesser cost than what it would be for you to provide additional affordable housing. So with a lot of discussion and assistance from the Affordable Housing Trust, we put in a formula for how you would calculate the value of that additional affordable and tied the dollar value of that back to the other two. So those are.
So there's a quid pro quo here.
Yes, so
very
that's the most recent version of this zoning that you received since
Yes.
they reopened, the select board reopened and accepted this. Those were a couple other key things that we wanted to include in
good.
there.
Okay, that's great. And again, the zoning board has approved this language.
Yes, oh yeah, planning board, I should say. Yeah, these were voted and sent to the select board, yeah.
Good.
So, let me see if there's anything I missed that I want to point out here. Just one of the key things is that the underlying business zoning allows for bigger buildings with less controls and doesn't require a special permit process. And so that was one of the things that I think a lot of people didn't understand. So initially, in terms of your, if you ask people about, well, why can't it be like a 2-story or some other kind of scale of district, is that what you can't do is to really take away someone's rights, but you can offer alternatives to their rights, right? So that's what we're trying to do with the, I just want to, kind of be clear about that, because we can't take that underlying zoning and down zone it too much without having property rights being, impacted.
Yeah,
Right,
understood.
yeah.
Does anybody have any questions? Cheryl, this has been very helpful. We appreciate you
Okay.
coming.
So you think it's safe to say it'll be 10 years before I see this on Chronicle?
I hope not.
Oh, gosh.
But you saw Chronicle do Lower Mills, right?
Yeah. Well, that was actually very good, too.
Yeah, wasn't it?
That was very well
Yeah.
done.
Like New Hampshire towns and stuff, how they do all those old mills over
yeah.
to shops and stuff.
Yeah.
It's very good, you know what I mean?
Well, I've walked every inch of Milton Village several times and went through all of this
bet
and
you
looked at all of these buildings, and I just think you've got so many wonderful things in such close proximity. It's really a wonderful area. Historic buildings, the waterfront, the bike path, amenities, and if we could get a few more amenities there, a little more housing, a little more tax base,
Yeah, it would be very vibrant.
I think
It's
so,
much more
yeah.
vibrant than it was even 20 years ago. I mean, part of it is the river itself
Right.
is so much cleaner, because I remember when I bought my house on Adams Street, my mother said, "Why do you want to own that?" Because when she was, when I was little, the Neponset River was horribly polluted, and the odor coming out of there.
Wow.
Forget what you got from the nice chocolate factory down the street, which you did going through Lower Mills. But as you got closer to the river, it was really a very offensive thing, and that was the sense that pervaded up until probably, as I say, 20 years ago. Through the 1990s, the perception improved. So I think to have this sort of view that it can be something vibrant and exciting, as other have done. I mean, it's limited because of the access, I think, and the trolley and that sort of thing, but I think it can be really nicer than it is.
So speaking of nicer than it is, and kind of butting against what John was just saying, have people been approached about the business owners wanting to sell their property to a different development? Are we voting on this and making this happen because people are banging on the door to redevelop parts of this?
No.
No.
I think we started, as I think I said, coming out of the master plan.
Yeah.
Now, there was an interest, and particularly with the Historical Commission, on if there was ways that this could help to save the Swift Hat Building.
Right.
But otherwise, what we know is that, 5 Canton Avenue, the funeral home closed, and that property
Right.
was sold through this process. We know that property's for sale. I happen to also know that I think
That's
it's
the old real
17 or
estate
19
office.
It's the one right next to it, it's also for lease.
it's also for sale, at least it's listed on,
Yeah.
and that, I don't have any, background knowledge about why that's listed for sale now.
Which one was this, Cheryl? I'm sorry.
The Wolf?
It's
There's-
The old real
one with
estate
the-
office, DeWolf's Real Estate, DeWolf and then Coldwell
Yeah.
Banker or
Yeah.
whatever
Yeah.
it was. And then you have the funeral home.
Right.
That is not being used as a funeral home anymore. So those are the two pieces of property that I think would have the most interest,
Yes.
because you've got parking and you've got, buildings that can be used for
Right.
some other use.
But
I
there
think-
could be lots of upgrades to some of those businesses on Adams Street, and I'm looking at this map, so I'm gonna say the left-hand side of Adams Street.
Right.
So the same side as the Citizens Bank
Yes.
kiosk. It looks run down. I don't even know what those businesses are, and I live right around the corner from here.
Like-
And so to me, I'm curious to know, kind of like John is, how quickly can these things be turned over?
Well-
Because I would like to see, especially now since the plate doesn't offer food anymore, where can we walk to actually have a cup of coffee besides coffee break? I know it's right there, but but I'm just curious, like if somebody is eagerly waiting for this vote to happen so that they can start taking the next steps to break ground.
I can tell you that we've heard from a number of the property owners that they're supportive of it.
Okay, good.
And they came to a planning board meeting to say so. Now, they don't necessarily have plans, on the boards ready to come in, but there's definitely interest.
Okay, good. Thank you for that.
And support.
Wasn't one building sold on the corner of Elliott and
Yes.
Adam?
That,
Oh, yeah.
I had found out about that, and I reached out to that owner, and he did come into the planning board and talk to us. And right now, he plans to basically keep it, the tenants that are there, and turn over the tenants as the leases.
Which building is this? I'm
It's
sorry.
the Webb Mill Building, so the one on Elliott and Adams.
Right on.
Next to Hayward Photography.
Oh, okay, next to Hayward's.
Yeah, it's
Okay,
where
right.
there's a gym, Milton
Oh,
Sport
right.
and Spa in there, and
Right.
in the back.
They've done a lot of work in that building. They did a nice job in that.
Yes, it's a beautiful building, and his intention is to maintain it, of course, and
Yeah.
then eventually he said he would be interested in what he called a live, work, play there, and so he's interested in the amenity of the river now that it's an amenity, like you said, George, right? I mean, in fact, that building was,
Oh, it was derelict. It was almost abandoned for a long time.
and in the back there, it's right along the
Yeah.
bike paths and along the river.
It
So
is.
you can envision that if you've been other
Absolutely.
places that are on water like that, it could be,
Absolutely.
it could be a wonderful place. So, and then there would be hope that that the Extra Space Storage would do something on their parking lot, but they are already under a special permit.
Right.
And so they would follow that other overlay, which is much bigger. So that wouldn't come in under this overlay.
For that building that's out, that would go out front, right?
Yeah.
In the parking lot, right. There's the hope that that company will someday
Do something.
do something there, yeah.
That's
And then
that's
the kiosk
great.
is one opportunity we think, again, is just, I mean, it's very, when you think about it, this is like a very small district.
Yes.
Very.
And what this zoning would allow in total is less than the size of 88 Wharf.
Yeah.
So we're not talking something, that,
That's the way
I mean,
to
that's
put
the
that.
thing, when I was in September, kind of putting all these stats together, and I was like, wow, that's something people can grasp,
Well, yeah.
because you can see that scale of building and you understand it, and you can envision that spread across all of these other sites.
Well, the
That's
other
something
interesting thing is
size,
that it's
right?
changed remarkably because the site of residences at Milton Landing at 88 Wharf Street was a cold storage for Hood ice cream for years and years and years, and nobody knew what it was back there, that it was back there or what was there. And when you think of that, something like that on the river, with all the views that beautiful residence at Milton Landing has now is just unbelievable. So if this opens up opportunities for development of that nature, I mean, let's look at it and see, let's give the opportunity and hope that the traffic is something that can be managed.
I just have one more question. First of all, I think that, thank you for this work. Thank you for doing all this. I can only imagine how many hours you spend walking this area, so thank you. I'm curious on the map that I'm looking at, and I know TV Land can't see this, but, so it's the side of the street of Elliott Street that abuts the river. It says that is also commercial.
Well, it's in the commercial
But
district.
what can you fit there?
You can't.
Okay, I just want to make sure that I
Yeah,
wasn't,
No.
okay.
I mean,
'Cause
unless
it's
somehow
like
you had
a-
air rights over the trolley, but I mean,
There's nothing that can go there, correct?
I can't guarantee that because, some people could figure out something, but as
clever,
of
but-
now, I'm not familiar
Okay.
with something.
Okay, thank you. That's my only questions.
Are there any other questions?
Balloon storage is
We have had, this has been very useful for us. If there are no other, Cheryl, is there anything else that you need to bring forward to us?
Just, again, those two companion articles are what we talked about, and town council, again, has reviewed
Approved the
these.
language.
Yeah, and these, these funds would be administered by the town administrator, but approval of use of the funds would have to also be granted by the planning board and the select board. So, again, I think, just like other funds, that's very targeted. One of the things that that community was very interested in was that the funds, because they're gaining, that extra floor and extra space is in their district, in their neighborhood, they wanted the improvements to stay in their neighborhood.
Right.
So the funds are set up that way. That's it.
Any further questions? Cheryl, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're very grateful
All right,
for your
thank
coming.
you.
And if anything arises, please let us know as soon as possible
Will
so
do.
we can respond accordingly. But thank you again. Appreciate
Okay,
your
all
work
right,
too.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So the next item that we have on our agenda is the consideration for the timing that we have to make to approve the rest of the articles. We shall have a presentation by the School Building Committee on Wednesday evening and the Library Committee on Wednesday evening. The major, at this point, we've seen all the major budget components and several of the ancillary ones that are of interest to us. At that point, I think we'll be in very good shape to start compiling our information and taking our votes, not the week of the school vacation, but the last week in February, so that we can actually begin drafting. Thank you, yes. We'll probably have a next meeting on the 24th of February, if that works for everybody. But I think if we can just soldier through these things, we will be in a very good position so that we don't have to be scrambling. I believe, given the information that we got from the governor's office and the ancillary funds that came through for the town, we will be doing level funding. We're not anticipating a 3% decline. And so I think that the amount of reallocation that's going to happen for the budget itself is well under $500,000, which in a $120 million budget is eminently doable. So from that perspective, I think we will have a reasonably straightforward job this year. Of course, what remains is the issues that we have in the next couple of years to build the fire department out and to contemplate something that we might have to do for the school department. But again, I think there are a lot of moving parts. I'd be very interested to hear what the school building committee has to tell us. So I believe that is it for the agenda. Does anyone have any new business that we have to consider before we consider adjourning? If not, the chair will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Chair thanks you very much for your diligence. And thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you very much. Same time Wednesday.